probably going to create a firestorm. But the alternative, as Martin Fowler points out, is flaccidity. So, might as well try, see what happens. One of the first things we did that made me start feeling good about what we were doing is we looked at we have like over 2,000, 3,000 people who've taken the beginning Scrum assessment. It's like, how well do you know what Scrum is, its artifacts, its rules, its roles, its time boxes. And of the people who took it, who have never been trained in Scrum, the average score was around 72%. Not bad. The average score for the people who were CSMs, who had taken training from the organization I founded, Scrum Alliance, their average score was 75%. Now, with both of these, the standard deviation was 16, 17 points. So there was no uniformity. This was all over the place. For those who were trained by people using the Professional Scrum Master course, which is much more focused uniform standard, the average score was 93%, and the standard deviation was 4. So what this means is that reworking the training programs, reworking the courseware, reworking the trainers, and holding them accountable to the success of their students, not just the survival of their students, their course, has had a positive effect. So that's, at least a starting point of good news. These are some of the questions that are in the Professional Scrum Developer Assessment. And you can start just by looking at them, getting a sense of the sort of firestorm that's going to erupt around this. Like, who says that that's the answer, right? So as you notice here, I'm not telling you what the answers are. So what's the primary purpose of refactoring? Because my boss told me to do it. No, that's not the answer. You encounter a bug. You're filling out a bug report. What are the attributes of a good bug report? Now, these would be things that I would expect a good software developer to know. Which of the following mechanisms can be used to prevent bad architectural layering if you're using Visual Studio? So these assessments have 3 components for a professional Scrum developer: Scrum, engineering practices, and then technology stack practices appropriate for the assessment that's being taken. This is for the .NET assessment. There's also Java assessments, Java with Eclipse assessments with specific questions. Architectural layering is an important consideration because, these are things that if you joined our profession in 1999 as part of the .com boom and you never really learned how to be a software engineer, you wouldn't know. But if you're part of a team, it's very important that you know. Otherwise, you're going to hold back the entire team. And you may be building software that's not very good. What is the best time to use gated check-ins? What's a gated check-in? You ought to know. So this is the type of things that are covered in the training as very basic engineering disciplines, practices. This is a picture, I think, of where we are with this program. And it's also a picture, I think, of where we are as an industry. I've worked with a number of organizations that are just really, really working very hard to improve their software development practices, their ability to deliver quality software, their ability to work collaboratively with their customers to optimize value. And I've also worked with some that aren't working very hard, and I'm working with some who could care less, just want the word Scrum. And so I expect this to be a fairly significant washout in our industry between those who really thrive and succeed and those who don't put in the effort to do it. So I think we have a fascinating next 5 years. And for better or worse, I expect a huge amount of controversy and discussion and perhaps even emergence. Who knows? But it's sure better than doing nothing, I think. So this is where we are with Scrum. I'm pretty pleased with where Scrum is. I'm not really too pleased with its adoption. I'm really pleased with how people are using it as a tool to do better. I'm not so pleased with the holes that it's exposed that we're going to have to start doing something about. I'm certainly looking for any number of partners who have expertise in those holes that it's exposed or has already in it that are going to work with us to fill those holes with training programs, with bodies of knowledge, with assessments. Because right now, if you say, I'm a software engineer, it means nothing. So this is no longer X-rated. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask about what's up? Anything that I potentially could have an intelligent answer to? But not everyone at once. Yes?
I'm a big James Shore reader, and one of the things he wrote an essay about recently was there's a lot of organizations out there that really just want to be agile but don't want to be good. Do you have an opinion about that? That kind of
yeah.
Ending up with an agile.
This was the downside of using, a lot of organizations that want to be agile but don't necessarily want to be good, they would never, of course, say that. They would just say, we want to be agile, but it's a huge effort to do so. Unfortunately, this is why the word agile is so desirable. Of course you want to be agile. To say you want to be stultified and solidified is not necessarily what people would do. It's become something you say you are, whether you know what it means or not. There are a number of agile processes that are well defined, which if you use will be very hard to use. And those include Scrum and extreme programming. My test case always with an organization when I walk in is so simple. I'll say to them, I say, we're agile. I say, okay, good, so use iterative incremental, right? And that's the first test. Iterative what? Second test is, what's your definition of done? Now, literally, if you select something to work on in a sprint and you don't know what done is, that is what you're supposed to do to it to turn it into something finished, then you don't know what you're doing, nor does your customer. And of the organizations I've worked with, not a lot of them have a definition of done that they adhere to, even if it's incomplete. So the word agile to me means very little other than a statement of I'm not waterfall. Any other questions, thoughts? Yes?
I'm curious, what amount of weight do you put on the principles behind Scrum compared to the actual practices of your framework that you've developed?
The framework is developed in accordance with the principles. So for instance, principles of it are transparency. That is, without transparency, you can't control a project. You can't manage the risk. And so the framework of Scrum is oriented toward keeping things transparent so decisions can be made and value can be optimized. Because of that, we have iterations of always less than a month. Because of that, we ask for, at the end of the iteration, for the thing to be done so it's transparent and everyone knows actually what it is. This is all based on something which is very different from traditional practices. It's philosophically, it's culturally different, and that's probably why Scrum is very hard to adopt. In a traditional approach, we plan something with the smartest people we have, and then we tell our people, who we often call resources, to do the work. And if they do the work right, then we guarantee success. In Scrum, in empirical or complex product development, which is a whole theory set in itself, you assume that the only people who can deal with work as complex as software development are the people doing it themselves. And then the job of management doesn't become to tell them how to do their work, instead becomes doing anything you can do to help them do the work. And that's a radical shift, both for the developers, because suddenly, as they've always desired, but are now are a little surprised to find they have the authority to do it, it's up to them to figure out how to do the work. It's a bit of a huge surprise for the managers because now they have to hold their breath and do everything they can to help the developers do their best rather than count on command and control to make sure they do what they were told to do. So one's a factory metaphor, the other is a very different, almost like a collegial metaphor or team-based metaphor.
So I guess my
Can everyone hear the question? I didn't even see you guys up there. I have to tell you guys everything. You are in nice cloth chairs. They are in leather recliners and they're being served drinks. Don't know how it happened. I guess there were 2 different fees for coming to the conference.
So I guess my observation was when you were going through the list of questions, they were very much practice-oriented, talking about architecture and that kind of thing. But are you also evaluating how well people have internalized the principles of transparency and facilitating work as opposed to managing work?
No, we're not testing that at all. This is almost like a fundamentals. It's ensuring that people know what to do. So very much like in the Scrum courses, we have a basics course where you will learn what Scrum is and why it works and how it works. But then the intermediate course is, why does it work and how do you use it if it works that way, and what's the upside of using it one way versus the downside of using it another way. So this is intended to fill the hole of basics for development. Yes?
Could you name like 2 or 3 of the most difficult challenges for an organization going from a waterfall approach to agile?
I get invited, I never answer questions directly. That would expose ignorance, right? So I often come into an organization and they'll say, we're interested in adopting Scrum, right? And I've learned to instead focus the conversation on what problems are you trying to solve? And they're typically, releases are taking longer and longer. They're slipping. The stabilization period's taking too long. Planning's taking too long. It's hard to get changes in midstream. The people wish they were not coming to work. Those list questions. And so I'll ask the management, I'll say, so why haven't you fixed these? I'll be like, well, that's not why I invited you in. I said, no, just, prep work. Why didn't you fix these things since you're the management? And I said, because the issue is if you use Scrum, all these problems that are causing those 6 or 7 things you've listed will become hugely visible, transparent, fly in your face. They'll no longer be hidden. And if you have the stamina, gumption, determination to solve them, then Scrum's a good thing. If you don't, you'll wish you had never seen it. And then someone gave me a further insight about this, which is an organization which produces those problems. Those are not dysfunctions in that organization. That is a smoothly running organization that is culturally and organizationally set up to generate those problems year after year after year. So when you bring in something that's going to expose those problems and give you an opportunity to solve it, you're not exposing dysfunctions, you're exposing the way they think, act, and work. And as anyone who has tried to change, like stopping smoking or losing weight or discovering they're an alcoholic, change is the hardest thing in the world. And when we come into an organization and we're talking about it, we work very hard to have them see the benefits, the potential, the hope, the reason to do this. But when they're doing it, they have to both commit organizationally, and this doesn't mean leadership says, I back this. Instead, it means I'll lead this. And also, it means that every person in that organization, because change happens person by person, has to see what it means for them, financially, personally, career-wise. Otherwise, it just doesn't move. So I view this a little like GM, Chrysler, Ford, not picking up on lean for 30, 40 years, because it was extraordinarily hard to adjust and adopt to lean, even though they saw themselves losing market share and everything. It's a cultural shift of equal dimension. So that is the hardest thing I find, is the perception of an opportunity to improve, a tool to improve with Scrum, and then a willingness to do the very, very difficult